Shall I begin?
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, great. I'll just start talking then. And so yeah, I just wanted to cover this is that verse, the sign of the prophet Jonah that Jesus says uh regarding how many days and nights he'll be in the belly of the earth, or as Jonah was in the belly of the whale, how many 3 days and 3 nights, how many days and nights. So this is kind of a chronology problem. And I started looking into this back in about 2005. I was looking into this matter because I had a friend who was an atheist who was claiming that the Gospels contradicted each other, and as to whether or not, Jesus at the Last Supper ate the Passover or not, and different things like that. And because of the wordings in each of the Gospels, at some points can be kind of confusing. And so there was an assumption that John had a different timeline than Matthew, Mark, and Luke. And so that there was this contradiction he was trying to point out. And at some point I somehow started emailing there's a brother, Paul Wade, in Texas, and I don't know, somehow I had learned that he had studied all this before. And so I emailed him and was happy to get an email back from him. Yeah, and found that he'd already done a very thorough analysis of some of these questions. So I was actually kind of satisfied with his conclusions. So um, he kept reiterating this over and over again, though, that there's no contradiction. Uh, despite what my atheist friend was reading and, what it looked like, when you read the English and, you think about, you put it together and it looks like there's contradictions, but he said there is no contradiction. Um, and so that included about, I would say, probably 50 different Bible passages that, we looked at separately and took notes on too. And he kind of straightened me out on so many different things that I feel a lot more competent about this subject now than I ever did before. Well, I'd say back when I was talking to him in 2005, only up until just now did I put together a presentation on it, because I needed something to teach for Sunday school after all, and this was sitting on the shelf, sort of, as it were. So I just needed to dust it off and make a presentation, put some slide deck together here, and away we go. So today, I hope to present his view, which is also now my view. It doesn't need to be your view. I don't think it's a matter of salvation or anything, but I would like to present this view in a way that is clear and makes sense, at least makes sense to me. So we get to this verse in question here in this passage, and he says, as Jonah was 3 days and 3 nights in the whale's belly, so shall the Son of Man be 3 days and 3 nights in the heart of the earth. And the question is, what exactly does Jesus mean when he said he would be in the tomb for 3 entire days and nights, or, like, in other words, 3 times 24, or 72 hours at least? Or does he mean 3 different days and nights, or some variation like that? Is there different ways of reading it, for example? And I'm pretty sure most of you know that, Jesus was laid to rest in the evening, and that the tomb was opened in the morning. And that kind of also brings a question of, well, there's these extra maybe 12 hours or so, or approximately, and where do those go? How did that fit in? So I'm pretty sure that you've all seen different variations of how to explain these things. But I'll just present here what I have on it, and then we'll look at some reasons maybe that other people arrive at different conclusions and see if we can explain those as well. When we read all the different gospel accounts, there's a lot of confusing things that are said. But one thing is very certain. We could try to figure out when Jesus, how long he was in the tomb and so forth. We don't know. Maybe it doesn't say, was it a Thursday? Was it a Wednesday? It doesn't say it was a Wednesday or anything like that. But one thing we know pretty certain is when this period ended. The tomb was clearly opened on Sunday at sunrise. And it says it was still dark when they got up to go to the tomb, early dawn. And at that time, the stone was rolled away. So, that's the one thing that seems very certain about all this is that the tomb was opened at dawn or sunrise on Sunday. And so we could kind of start to put together a timeline, and we can put some data points on there. But the first data point we'll put on there is we have Sunday, and I've demarked these as sort of our Gentile way of counting days, from midnight to midnight, right? And I'm going to start putting in other things here, but first we want to set this as sort of an anchor point because this time seems absolutely certain to me that, and I haven't found anybody disagree with this when the tomb was opened, right? And so we'll just say we'll have an anchor point here, and that we can figure out where to put things by working our way backwards. So now we read that the Son of Man, that he rose on the third day. And this is also something that's very clear. It says it over and over and over again, that Jesus rose from the dead on the third day after he was crucified. And again we see this. Even in retrospect, they're talking about it. They killed him by hanging him on a cross, but God raised him from the dead on the third day and caused him to be seen. And again, what Paul says here in 1 Corinthians, third day, according to the scriptures, it was he raised from the dead. And again, we read that the chief priests and our rulers handed him over to be sentenced to death, and they crucified him, but we had hoped that he was the one who was going to redeem Israel. And what is more, it is the third day since all this took place. So this is on Sunday during the daytime, and this is on the road to Emmaus, right? And it was still only the third day since they had crucified Jesus. So here's a question. How many 24-hour days have elapsed since Jesus was killed, since Jesus died? Would we say that 3 full days have elapsed? If we said that 3 days had full days had elapsed, would it still be the third day, or would it then be the fourth day? One helpful clue can be found in Genesis 40. This is the story of Joseph. He's interpreting the dreams. And he says that the third day, he equates the third day to within 3 days. So in other words, not more than 3 days, but within 3 days. And there's also, you can see the obvious symbolism here, right? In the wave offering. There's also more symbolism. We had the, if you read this story, if you read the instructions for how they were to perform the Passover, it said, on the morning after the Sabbath, in the morning, they would have the wave offering. So they would wave the barley loaf. I think also symbolic of resurrection. So it looks to me like the third day does not go into like the fourth day. It's 3 days or less. It's somewhere between 2 days and 3 days. That's what I'm kind of leaning toward at this point. But we get some scriptures like this, where Jesus said that he would rise again after 3 days, right? And then you go, well, can the scriptures contradict each other? How can that be? Does this mean that after 3 24-hour periods have elapsed, or does it maybe mean after 3 partial days? Um, this first passage here, it simply shows that after 3 days, the term after 3 days can be interpreted as the third day, or in other words, still within 3 days. Um, I don't know what we do with the second passage in Hosea. It says the third day. It kind of equates it with after 2 days, right? So maybe the way to reconcile this is that after 2 days does indeed mean 2 full days or 2 24-hour periods, right? But either way, I think that the scriptures being consistent on how long Jesus was in the tomb would pretty much require us to say that it was somewhere in between 2 full days and 3 full days, not more than three and not less than two. And so, with that data, trying to reconcile all of these scriptures, um, I've added some a range, a time range here, right? If the tomb was open on Sunday morning at sunrise, and we work ourselves back to 2 full days, we know it's going to go somewhere between 2 and 3 days. Here's the third day, and here's this is the next day. You can see that this is our time range here that we're working with now, apparently. So to reconcile all of the scriptures is what we want to do. So one of the things I think that some people will say, well, I think that he was raised on Friday. And so uh, they'll think that it was Friday because it says that the next day was a Sabbath here, as you see. Um, and so how can we answer this? Because scripture cannot contradict itself. We can't violate the sign of the prophet Jonah, right? And just put Jesus in the tomb only 2 nights, right? If I go back to this drawing here, right? If we make him in the grave go into the tomb on Friday evening or afternoon or whatever, then he's only in the grave 2 nights maximum. So there's no way that you could squeeze that. Jesus clearly said 3 nights. So that's something that I think that we basically have to say there must be some explanation as to why it says that the next day was the Sabbath day. Um, and I think it says here that it was a high day, right? Or Magus Hemera. So it was a holy day, I think, in other words. So I think that the way to explain it, from what I can tell, right, is that this Sabbath was a high day. It was in other places it says in all of the Gospels it says it was the preparation day, and in John it's very specific. It says it was the preparation of the Passover. So the next day would have been the Passover, the Jewish Passover, and um, so this is the day that, you know, that this is the preparation day when they purged out the leaven and when they killed the Passover in preparation for that evening when the Passover, when they would actually eat the Passover lamb. So if the next day was a Passover, right, they were not to work on it. So in that sense, it was a Sabbath, right? But it wasn't a Sabbath in the sense of being a Saturday Sabbath, because that would break our that would contradict our scripture where, you know, the sign of the prophet Jonah. But um the Passover began actually kind of, they would call it the Passover, the preparation day kind of was included in that term Passover, right? On Abib the 14th, right? But on the 15th is when the feast of Passover actually began, and that would begin in the evening, right? Well, they had their morning, their well, evening in the morning, or evening in other words, nighttime and daytime, they called as one day. So so the Passover feast would begin sometime after sunset on Abib the 15th. So perhaps to overcome the contradiction of the next day being a high Sabbath, um, and keep our Thursday crucifixion intact and the burial day and not violate the sign of Jonah, it seems like we need to be able to basically say by Sabbath, that by the term Sabbath, they didn't mean Saturday in this case. They meant that it was just a day that they wouldn't do any work. That's the only way I think that I've figured out how to make it work. Where listen to anybody has suggestions afterwards. Um, we know from several points of evidence that the next day was Passover, right? Um, there's a verse, you know, in the Last Supper, after they ate, Judas left and they thought that he was going to buy some stuff in preparation for the feast, right? So uh, this was after supper. So, um, I mean, unless they had the feast really late that night, it wouldn't make sense. And then the next morning, right after the cock crows, right, then they're still talking about not being defiled so that they could eat the Passover, right? So the Passover hasn't been eaten yet, but we all know that they're supposed to eat the Passover at night. That you know the story. They kill the lamb, and then in the eve they paint the around the doorposts with blood, and then they eat the lamb that night, and there's not to remain any of it the next day, and so forth. So for it to be morning and the cock crows and so forth, and they still haven't eaten the Passover yet, that would also indicate that the day Jesus was crucified was the preparation for the Passover. But it comes right out and says that early in the chapter in John 18. But well, John 19:14, it was the preparation of the Passover. So after the Last Supper, Passover hadn't yet begun. The next morning, the Passover was still future. The day, all the Gospels agree that that day was the preparation of the Passover. Um, and so, yeah, it should be enough to nail it down that the Passover would have been the next day, which was Friday. So that would have been Abib 15. And Jesus was then crucified on Abib 14th in the afternoon sometime. We get this term between the evenings um, in the instructions for when they were to kill the Passover lamb. So we established that Jesus died on the cross on the preparation day, Abib 14, pretty well, I think, when the Passover lambs were slain. And so we asked, kind of narrow it down just a little bit more. What time of day did he die? And it says he died on the preparation day. So we read that, we just read that, and so this tells us here what time of day that the lambs were to be slaughtered. But it says in the evening in the English, at least most versions. The Hebrew is actually literally means between the evenings, right? And so what does that mean in the Hebrew though? Actually, how do they interpret that? Now, John Thomas wrote about this. He tried to answer this in his essay, The Difficulty Removed. And he said that the idiom between the evenings basically means between 6 p.m. of two different consecutive days. I think what he's trying to do here, the difficulty he's trying to remove is why did Jesus call the Last Supper the Passover when he ate it the day before the Passover? Um, and so I think he's trying to remove this by stretching out the time when you could actually kill the Passover to the period of a whole 24-hour day. Um, he's basically trying to squeeze two Passover cedars, like, into the same, into, two different meals in one 24-hour day. So he's trying to reconcile in his mind, how can this be, right? And I'm not trying to answer that question right now. Maybe we'll answer it later. I think it's not really in the scope of the time we have for our class today to deal with the Last Supper, but um, today's topic is to just establish how long was Jesus in the tomb and when did he die on the cross. And suffice it to say that John Thomas here was trying to squeeze two Passover meals into one 24-hour day. And the issue here is that the same time is referred to in Deuteronomy 16:6 as the going down of the sun. So it's a very specific, more specific period than just, uh, you can't just do it after dark or anything like that. And another place it's called, it describes the same time when the lambs were to be slain, and it says toward the evening. So this can't possibly mean after the sun has gone down, as that would already be the next day then. So if you're following me, that it has to be some time before sunset. So I think that John Thomas just kind of made up this definition in order to remove a difficulty for himself. Um, and the way he wanted just to have an answer to understand it. And he was, speculating that he came up with this definition in order, but he didn't consult any Jewish works about this, which will be evident in a moment. Because I mean, after all, what would Jews know about keeping the Passover, right? So anyways, let's check and see what Jews say about this idiom between the evenings as to when the lambs were slain. And here's the Jewish Encyclopedia. It says the time between the two evenings, Ben Ha Barayam, was construed to mean after noon and until nightfall. And this is our famous Jewish commentator Alfred Edersheim, who's known for meticulously studying not only the scriptures, but also all the rabbinical writings and the Mishnah and the Talmud and so forth. And here's what he has to say. The period designated as between the two evenings when the Paschal lamb was to be slain was past. There could be no question that in the time of Christ, it was understood to refer to the interval between the commencement of the sun's decline, which would be noon, and what was reckoned as the hour of his final disappearance, about 6 p.m. And last but not least, Josephus tells us this. he might know something about it because he was living at the time and he was a Jew. He says that this term between the evenings meant the ninth hour. Commenced at around the ninth hour, which was approximately 3 p.m. Right? Remember, Jesus said, "Are there not 12 hours in a day?" So we have, starting at sunrise at 6, and we have 12 hours till sunset. The ninth hour then would be uh, 3 in the afternoon. So Josephus is in agreement with other authorities on this. And I think there are other sources as well, but we won't go into them. This is just regarding the general evening sacrifice, by the way, um, which he said took place the ninth hour, again, consistent. So about 3 in the afternoon, they began sacrificing for the evening sacrifice. I don't want to. I mean, he says it took place. It took about 2 hours, and there's probably other people that said that it was all within a certain hour. I'm not looking to get that nitpicky with it. Just kind of want to nail down, the approximate time of day that it was about the ninth hour, or approximately 3 p.m. because that's exactly when Jesus died. Um, it would appear that he died on the day that the lambs were slain, and that he died at the same time that the lambs were to be slain, 3 p.m. And I believe that Jesus probably knew this in advance, right? He read the scriptures, so he knew exactly when he would die. And I believe that he also knew exactly when he would be raised from the dead. And so if we place that 3 p.m. marker on various days, we can see that there's only one place where the scriptures align together and don't contradict each other, and that's Thursday at 3 p.m. At least that's what works for me, and I know other people might have objections and different, uh, still have some contradictions to work out, but this works very cleanly. I think that there's issues, a lot of most Christadelphians say that he died on Wednesday or he died on Friday. Hardly anybody says he dies on Thursday, and there's different reasons for that. But we got into one. We talked about how it said the next day was a Sabbath. I think we answered that, but all the other things, all of the other requirements are met with this particular timing. So this was another quote from Paul Wade. He says, most Christadelphians believe that Christ died on either Wednesday or Friday. First of all, with regard to salvation, this does not matter. However, if one is trying to put all the pieces together in a logical way and in a scriptural way, both of these conclusions are wrong. Scripture is clear that he died on Thursday. So he's pretty adamant about about the opinion, and he's looked at a lot of different scriptures, and he's talked to various rabbis and things in order to work it out, and that's what he came up with. And that's kind of what I would tend to agree with that conclusion, but I'm always interested to hear in other ideas. And um, so some points but to make here, but I thought I'd open it up a little bit and let anybody ask any questions or interject any comments at this. Yeah. And if you're in the hall, maybe somebody needs to run around with the microphone or something. I don't know how that works.
Okay, I'm muted. Hello.
Hi, Jonathan.
I hesitate to be first in line, but nobody else is talking.
Hmm.
Okay. Um, no, it's as far as Thursday's fine by me. I don't care. But as far as one problem you have with dating things between biblical times and now is how people count days, right?
Yeah.
And this is now, for instance, the Roman calendar back then, which had an 8-day week, okay? But the eighth day of the week is called nuns, which means 9. Well, that sounds weird. Also, other people did the same thing. Now, if I say 3 days from now, this is Sunday, you're going to say Wednesday, right?
What? If I
If I
say,
say, if I says, well, I'll see you today's Sunday, I'll see you in 3 days, you're going to say, oh, Wednesday, right?
you would think Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. Yeah, you would think
But
so.
no, not if I'm living in the first century. It'd be Tuesday.
Because you have
Because
an extra, you're saying because of the 8-day week, or
no, because when I count the days, it's today, tomorrow, and the
oh,
next
you're
day.
counting
Because
today. Yeah.
you count today as part of the count.
Yep.
So 3 days is today, tomorrow, and the next day.
Yeah. I never heard of the 8-day week though. That's a new one.
Yeah, that was standard in the Roman Empire. The various times they tried to change it. Julius Caesar tried to change it and change the calendar. It didn't work so well.
Right.
It finally became standard the way we have it, with a Sunday and everything, in 7 days. It was Constantine in 300 and something. So for most Romans, for most of the first century, in most places, it did be an 8-day week. Of course, in the Jews, it was a 7-day week with a lunar calendar. So forget about the 8-day part. I was just giving this a thing on how people counted. So, for instance, if Luke was telling you something happened on a certain day, he'd be counting the Roman way, pretty sure.
Yeah. Now I
Okay.
had, yeah.
So that's that. You gotta keep that in account. It might not be contradictions. It just might be the way people count.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I had one brother when I first was dealing with this. Well, I had an elder brother tell me that I was wrong. And then I started showing him all the data, and then he was like all excited about it. And all of a sudden I was right. And then he went off and to study it with new zeal. It's kind of interesting. Yeah, more points. I had like that we read this in Matthew 27:45. Uh was it maybe it might have been back a few slides. Let's see. Yeah, there was darkness over all the land. So from the 6th hour to the 9th hour, there was darkness over all the land, right? So that would have been from noon until 3. That would have covered the time up until Jesus died, about 3 hours up until Jesus died. Um, uh, so, first of all, I think it would have ensured that Jesus would have been the first lamb to be slain, because everybody else was kind of groping around in the dark. I don't know how they would be. Up until 3 o'clock, the priests were supposed to be examining the lambs and making sure that they were flawless or whatever, before they started sacrificing them. And so if it was completely dark all over the whole land, that'd make that kind of thing, that kind of activity a little difficult, right?
Well, it depends if darkness means totally black and nobody can see anything. People obviously were watching what was going on at the crucifixion, so they must have been able to see something. Now,
Yeah.
darkness just may meant thunderclouds and so forth and so on. The sun wasn't shining.
Yeah. Who knows how dark it was, right?
Right. And
Was it a,
besides being, which I bet you at the temple, they actually had torches and lights they could look at the lambs
they
with. But that's
probably did. Yeah. And then another point similar to that is that they were supposed to be also purging out the leaven from their homes on the preparation day. And the sources indicate that that began sometime around noon on the preparation day. So if there was darkness from 12 noon to 3 p.m., that would make that purging of the leaven very well, difficult, you know, if it was, I'm sure, like you said, they can bring their candles out and so forth. Um, but you know, it would have been a hindrance, right? At least for them to do purging out the leaven without enough light. And also noteworthy at this time is, you know, that Jesus was, he died when the lambs were to be slain, but he is also the time that they were supposed to be purging out the leaven, he was dying on the cross. And if you think about it, there's a pretty strong parallel there, I think, between, you know, Jesus being purged of his human nature, or fighting against his rebellious thoughts, however you want to say it, that he in his nature that might be opposed to God's will, purging that out of himself once and for all, I think is kind of an uh, interesting parallel, that to say the least.
Mark,
Hi, Marco.
hey, how are you?
Good, thank you. How are you?
I'm doing well. Um, so Matthew 12, verse 40,
Matthew 12:40.
yeah. Just as Jonah was 3 days and 3 nights in the belly of the great fish. So,
You're breaking up. Hello?
hang on, Mark.
Okay. Somebody got disconnected. Thanks for all your hustling with all the audio and video, by the way, Ruthann. I heard you talking in the background, but I didn't hear what you said.
No, I just say, that, it's fairly clear, 3 days and 3 nights in the heart of the earth. I guess, kind of what you're trying to explain is when those 3 days and 3 nights actually were.
Oh, okay. I was gonna suggest that this night counts, but this day doesn't count. So we count for days, for 3 days. I would count this day, and this partial day, right? Between the time he died and was buried was probably somewhere in here, because they needed to get him into the tomb by night, they said. Because they needed to eat the Passover anyways. It was a high day. And then I would suggest that the 3 nights are 1, 2, and 3, 3 complete nights. So I would suggest 3 complete nights, 2 complete days, and 1 partial day would be 3 days and 3 nights. If you were to stretch it over to here, then you'd have 4 nights, by the way. You know, if in your eagerness to get 3 entire days, you'd have to move the burial to here, which would make it 4 nights.
If the Friday starts at 6 p.m. on Thursday night, which would be their Friday, okay?
Yeah.
Starts at 6 o'clock Thursday evening.
Oh, this Friday. This, if you're saying, if
Their
this
Friday,
is the start,
their
this is the
Friday
start.
starts
of their
Their-
Friday.
Their Friday starts at around 6 o'clock on Thursday night.
Yeah.
So if they put him in they wanted to get him off the cross and out of the way before it started. Now,
Yeah.
mind you, so if they put him in the tomb, if they hustle around and stuck him in the tomb before 6 o'clock, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So then you have the complete Friday is 6 p.m. Thursday night to 6 p.m. Friday. So that's a day and a night. Then you have 6 p.m. Friday to 6 p.m. Saturday. That's a day and a night. Right?
Well,
And
you're calling this Friday, right? For a Jewish Friday.
Friday starts at 6. So he's in the grave sometimes slightly before then.
Yeah, he's in the grave Thursday afternoon.
Sometime after 3 o'clock, before 6 o'clock.
Right. Let's call it
now-
5:30.
Okay, whatever. So he's got all of Friday and all of Saturday, right?
Yeah.
And then Sunday starts at 6 p.m. Saturday night.
This Sunday here.
Sunday starts there. So now he's in
Okay.
another night until the morning.
Right.
So that's 3 nights, however you work it. And and again, you don't have to have complete days to have days. So
Right.
daylight's in the middle of their day. You're already halfway through the day practically at midnight, at dawn.
Yeah.
All right. Because
Right.
it's not midnight to midnight, it's 6 p.m. to 6 p.m. So you
Yeah,
end
well,
up
the Jewish day was 6 p.m. to 6 p.m., right?
right. So you if you count Jewish days,
Yeah.
right, you got 1, 2, 3 nights and 1, 2, 3 days, no problem from Thursday.
Yeah,
Right.
but those days
mean,
are
without-
daylight days. Because if it says 3 nights and 3 days, that wouldn't be a 24-hour days because it's
No,
including
but
the nights.
it doesn't matter whether it's a 24-hour day, because
I
that's
know.
not that's
Well,
what
we're listing the nights separately so that we're talking about those.
Right. But days and nights don't
Yeah.
have the same meaning into Hebrew all the way back in the Old Testament, which I think you were right. Just to say something is a day doesn't mean it has to be a complete 12 hours of time, nor does it say a day sometimes means 24 hours.
It depends
But
on the context, I think, right? Because
Right,
it
context.
could mean 24-hour day, or it could mean the daylight time, or yeah.
Or sometime in the daylight time. It doesn't have to be the
Yeah,
entire.
right. Yeah. Right.
And it's same with the other thing, right?
Yeah.
So they now the point of it is though is if they were eating the Passover meal, right,
Right.
on the Thursday, it would have been after 6 o'clock, and it would have been Thursday already.
Are you talking
Yes.
about when they're eating the Passover? Who's eating the Passover?
Well, Jesus and however many of his disciples were there, which was more than 12. But anyway, they're eating a meal.
The day
They
before
eat-
the Passover, they were
They
eating.
they were eating it a day early. They
Right,
were
yeah.
eating it on the preparation day.
Yeah, right, exactly.
Okay, that's okay. But that means that night in Gethsemane and so forth and so on is Thursday night. I mean, it's Thursday. It's already their day is
No,
already
no, no, no,
started at 6
no,
p.m.
not if Thursday was the preparation day.
Yes, it
Oh,
starts. At 6 p.m.
oh, I see what you're saying.
It starts at 6 p.m.
I see what you're
Wednesday
saying.
evening.
Yeah. Okay, I agree. But it would be Thursday night from a Jewish standpoint, and it'd be Wednesday night from a Gentile standpoint.
Right.
Okay.
So
I get
this people have confusion with this is because they don't know how to. There's a difference in how you count days.
Yeah, I like to like start like talking like Gentile, like, you know, in our own language, and then I'll do some translation into the Jewish or the Hebrew, whatever, and just to make a point, and then I'll come back and, you know, try to translate it back into like our kind of way of looking at it, so
Okay.
just that
So
everybody's on board.
if somebody says, "Oh, gee, we need a Wednesday in there," it's because, or it's a Thursday or it's a Friday.
Mhm.
Depends on how you count. So you can have arguments for all of them without
Yeah.
having. Now, I've always thought Thursday was a better choice, but
I thought about putting lines in here for the Jewish demarcations too, but then I was like,
Yeah.
it would get kind of messy. But yeah,
all right, I'm just
use your
saying
imagination.
that
Yeah.
depends on how you count. Again, everything depends on how you want to count.
Yeah.
But,
Yeah,
okay.
I was going to suggest that if if it was the case that they were not able to, let's say, purge out the leaven or whatever for some reason, would it imply that the Jews wouldn't have been able to eat the Passover that year or something? I don't know. It's just kind of interesting question. But anyways, that kind of was the end of my class. Uh yeah, this I'll save. This is not something I've done yet, but I think I'm looking at maybe doing this in another session sometime and just kind of look at the Last Supper, because they called it a Passover, right? But there's some interesting contradictions, that not just the time, but other things too that will come up that make you question. And who knows, we'll try to maybe dive into, why was he calling it the Passover when it was the day before, and things like that. And did he eat lamb or did he not eat lamb, and things
He
like
did.
that.
He didn't call it the Passover. He said he wanted to eat a Passover meal.
In a way, kind of implied it was the Passover, because he was supposed to prepare the Passover in this one place, and then they ate the Last Supper, but they never ate the Passover. So
Can you hear me?
Mhm.
we can hear you, Mike.
Okay, it's an unresolvable argument because I've had this argument with my Catholic mother-in-law for years and years and years, never been resolved. She's a Friday person.
Yeah,
Mike, just one quick thing,
we can barely hear you. Sorry.
22, I believe, that I earnestly desire to eat this Passover with you. And I'm wondering if that Passover we're talking about isn't the actual Passover day that would normally be celebrated, but be the Passover of his slain, of him being slain as the lamb. But that's the Passover he's talking about. Yeah. That is the Passover. Jason. Friday, that's right. I'm not worried about the day right now. Just the thought that when Jesus uses the word, I earnestly desire to eat this Passover with you, that the Passover he's talking about is the slaying of himself as a lamb.
Yeah, I think there's
This supper was a celebration of that event.
yeah, I think there's something to that. And I think we'll save that for another day, but I really just kind of wanted to actually sort of put a really solid nailing down of the day that Jesus was crucified, the day, when he was resurrected, um and when he was crucified in relation to when was the Passover, and then we'll deal with why did it seem like he was calling the Last Supper the Passover. And there's a few different ideas there, um but I also I think we could actually, if we examine the Last Supper, we can draw out some very stark contrasts with how the Passover was supposed to be held and what they actually did. There's a lot of contrast there that's worth exploring. Anyway, that's it for me.